Israel right now is a safe haven for pedophiles.
Well, I'm finally getting around to making the video about Candace Owens' claims about Israel. I know several of you have asked me to do this, and I am finally doing it. I had to take a little bit of a break just because I had a lot of personal things. And I also just want to say I really appreciate a lot of you guys encouraging me to do these videos. Sometimes you question whether you should be doing them or you're supposed to be doing them, but I feel like God is faithful to continuously let me know what he wants me to do and what he wants me to say. And he does that oftentimes by your encouragement. So I really appreciate that when I'm questioning, like, I want you to have me talk about things that you want me to have me talk about and not just things that maybe I'm interested in or feeling fiery about. So, okay, without further ado, I am going to get right into it. And really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you the highlights on her two main claims that bring her to this conclusion and this assertion that the modern state of Israel is one, a cultic nation, and then two, was created as a haven for the P word, by P words and other sexual deviants, and then also a haven for P words.
On the basis of the fact that you're Jewish, Israel right now is a safe haven for pedophiles. Okay, that is protecting pedophiles. So we're talking about men like Leo Frank who rape little girls, know that they can go, if they're Jewish, they can go to Israel and they'll be provided a safe haven.
Let's get into it. Okay, so the first actual assertion by her for supporting this claim is that it was created as a haven for P words, by P words. And here is how she kind of connects that and makes that claim. So one, she bases it on them being may have been founded by Frankist in, I believe, episode 35. She also talks more about Israel in episode 47 and several other ones. It's an ongoing theme. So I have watched multiple videos and I'm going to clip some of those for you here.
Is that there is a religious cult that is known as Frankism. Okay, you can look this up, look up Jacob Frank and Frankism. They pretend to be Jews. They are not Jews. Okay, they practice incest and pedophilia as a sacramental rite.
So her Frankist assertions, and if you don't know who the Frankists are, I'm going to give you a brief background so you can understand. Frankists were founded by Jacob Frank. He's an 18th century Polish prophet and founder of the Frankist sect. I'm going to read off notes a little bit here so I can get this right. They practiced radical mystical beliefs and sometimes promoted doing the opposite of Jewish law, breaking taboos to reach redemption. So it was basically a heretical group. They are not Jewish in religion. They were Jewish in ethnicity. They're a cult, definitely evil, practiced a lot of sexual deviance, definitely were accused of that by rabbinical groups and Catholic groups of their time, and they practice sexual rituals and things like that. There is no evidence that historians show of the P word being involved in these rituals, but that has been asserted by Candace, and she's pretty relentless about it. And one of the evidences for this P word involvement comes in with a guy by the name of Leo Frank.
The fact that I learned from Gershom Scholem, an Israeli historian, that Leo Frank, just so you guys know, is a direct descendant of Jacob Frank. So it is very likely that Leo Frank was not a Jew. Okay, this is not a person who followed the Torah. Leo Frank was very likely a Frankist.
So like I said, Jacob Frank is an 18th century Polish prophet, self-proclaimed. So that would be in the 1700s. Leo Frank comes along at the end of the 19th century in 1884, which is when he was born. But she says she can connect the two. And if you want to go back and look at that, it's a very circumstantial evidence that requires a lot of assumption and foredrawn conclusions, and even historians say they can't connect them. Obviously, they have the same last name, and I'm not even saying I really care, honestly. And I'm going to tell you, after I go through these two claims, why I think they're irrelevant. Even if every single thing she's saying is true, which I don't think that it is, there's so much historical evidence and scholars smarter than me that have studied this, even read, she cites books about the Frankists, about Leo Frank in particular, I'm going to talk about, and even cherry picks out of those sources. She also uses Wikipedia a lot.
Interesting. So on Wikipedia, there's just an entry for sorcery, just the word sorcery.
So there's just a lot of problems with her evidence. But even if they're all true, I'm going to talk about at the end why it's irrelevant, especially for Christians. Why is it irrelevant, even if it's all true? So, but back to Jacob Frank and Leo Frank. So she has to connect Leo Frank to Jacob Frank, this self-proclaimed Polish prophet who founded the Frankists, which was a cultic group. I think there is plenty of evidence to support that they were evil, they were cultish, they were sexually deviant. All of that, I think, is true. But she has to connect Leo Frank to Jacob Frank, because then that makes him a Frankist, even though they're separated by more than a century. And historians disagree. That's what she does. And so Leo Frank was lynched in 1915 over his conviction of a young Catholic girl's murder named Mary Fagan. She talks about this a lot. And she also adds in there that he was a P word. She cites Leonard Dinerstein's book, The Case for Leo Frank, in her podcast on episode 35.
Book that was written as the comprehensive account of the Leo Frank case by a man named Leonard Dinerstein.
And she gives evidences from that book to support her claims. But what she also fails to do, and this is very typical Candace, is that she cherry picks evidences out of sources or out of things people said, does this all the time with Charlie Kirk, or some of their actions, but she leaves out a bunch of other stuff. So in that same book that she uses excerpts from to support what she's saying about Leo Frank and his guilt, she fails to mention that what Leonard Dinerstein does in that book is he gives the case for his guilt and his innocence, and then concludes that he can't really come to a conclusion on whether he's guilty or innocent. The other thing that she does is she completely disregards that the judge in the case later, after his conviction, regretted the decision, appealed for his clemency on the death penalty, which the governor, under over 1,000 death threats to him and his wife, granted. So this was a very controversial case. I don't know that we'll ever truly know what happened. Sentence. Now, he was lynched by a mob, and why this matters, not only because she's trying to connect him to Jacob Frank and this cultic group and the P word and all those things, and then asserting that he was definitely guilty, like that's what she's asserting, is that the ADL was used his case as a reason to be formed. So she's saying the ADL was formed to protect a P word and a murderer, right? So that's what she's saying the ADL was founded for. And in the midst of that, the father of modern Zionism, which is Theodore Herzl, she's saying that he was also connected to this group, which is one of the reasons why he wanted to form the modern state of Israel, was to, again, be a haven for P words, for sexual deviance, for Frankist. And that's why she quotes and says that the modern state of Israel may have been formed by Frankist. So all of that is kind of her evidence, and she walks through it in more detail, but that's the gist, is that it, from Jacob Frank to Leo Frank to Theodore Herzl, that they're all connected in this rather disgusting Frankist group that was not Jewish in religion. They were Jewish ethnically. And then the founding of Israel came about through the forming of the ADL, Theodore Herzl, the father of modern Zionism in the 19th century, and completely disregards the Holocaust, like completely disregards millions of Jews having no homeland for thousands of years. That's not a thing. Like, that's not a problem. Only talks about these things as the reason for the forming, like the real reason, right? Because she is the only one that has the truth. And if you see my post on how to know you're in a cult, that's one of them. Another way to know is if your leader starts getting dreams.
Had a vivid dream this weekend, and Charlie came to me and he told me that he was betrayed. There's nothing and no one that is going to stop the truth from coming out, and it is going to have international consequences. Take that to the bank. Quote me on that.
Interestingly enough, Jacob Frank fancied himself a prophet as well. She's getting dreams and visions about what happened that no one else is getting. Like, she's getting prophecy that no one else is receiving, but she's receiving them about Charlie Kirk being betrayed. And I just think that's a really interesting connection there. So sometimes it's the pot calling the kettle black, truly. Okay, so that's her first claim, Frankist origins in the state of Israel, founded by P words. Her other kind of evidence she claims on this whole P word thing is that they don't extradite P words. So people convicted of P word, they don't extradite them in the state of Israel today. And that is true. They don't extradite any criminal from Israel. Any Jewish person, they do not extradite them. And I think the reasons are obvious if you take that fact in consideration. It's a protective thing in place to protect Jewish people from anti-Semitism and from the kind of persecution and Holocaust that they've experienced in the past. Do I think that they should extradite them? Yes, I think they probably do, especially to allies like the United States. I think they should absolutely extradite them. But that to say and take it out of context that they are a haven for P words because of that law, but actually protects all criminals. And it doesn't mean they're not punished in Israel. So she leaves all that out. It doesn't mean there's not punishment and laws against it. She leaves all of that out and only says it's a haven and also founded by them. You see how this kind of works, that she cherry picks history. She plucks people out, evil people with the Frankist and those kind of things. And maybe Leo Frank was guilty. I'm not even here to say whether he was or wasn't. I'm just here to point out that she completely disregards the evidence for his innocence and only looks at what she wants to look at to support her narrative that the state of Israel is evil and founded by P words as a haven for P words. And then the same thing with the law. She doesn't give you the full context. She just says that it's, basically a sanctuary for them. But in reality, they don't extradite any criminals at all. And it's illegal to be a P word in Israel, and you're still going to get punished. They just don't extradite you. And I think they should. But I'm just saying that's how she does it. Okay.